Thelma Louise, I really want to start at the end. So I think we're just going to do that. So here's the car flying over the canyon. And freeze frame. Go to white. I think go to white was very strange, but I think they're implying they're going to heaven or something like that. So Callie Khouri explained that it wasn't that they were gonna go die, they were gonna fly. And that's why the freeze frame is there. Which is a very interesting take that I never would have gotten from actually watching it. Because to me it was very clear they were gonna go, that was it. They are committing suicide. So then the question is it like a Romeo and Juliet commit suicide because the world is against them kind of thing? Possibly, because the kiss at the end has apparently made this a movie for the LGBTQ community as well. That's also something I never actually understood or have gotten from the movie myself, because it was so clearly in the buddy-buddy genre, and they both had their love interests outside of the core relationship with themselves, with each other. And that's what I see a lot with when they say, oh, we're making this man style, but let's put some women in. Is very often the women suddenly have families, husbands, usually not multiple per person, but hey, boyfriends, kids, and sometimes parents, siblings, things like that. Whereas you have the movies, because we're talking 1991 here, it's fairly early for buddy shows for women. Apart from Cagney and Lacey, yeah, this would be the first, maybe. I mean, you have to look it up. But it's certainly for the big audience, the big Western audience, it would be one of the iconic ones. But you look at male buddy shows, which is all the other buddy shows ever, and films, they don't have family, they don't have kids, they don't have parents, they don't have siblings, they barely have girlfriends. Like, literally, the girlfriend bit is usually a separate storyline that happens because, whoa, look at him being cool and sleeping with a woman. And then very often it's not actually a relationship. It's like incidental, that person happens to be in their storyline, they make love, if you're lucky, and go separate ways, or she gets killed, or both. But the actual relationship, which these two women have relationships before they even go on this road trip. And those are things that are markedly different from if you have female protagonists, but also how this world writes female protagonists. Because, oh my god, they cannot actually be people without having men in their lives. They cannot... Thelma could never have existed if she hadn't been suppressed by her husband. Like... well, she could have just been suppressed by the rest of society. Louise wouldn't have existed without her boyfriend. That's a little harder case to make, because Jimmy is not essential to Louise's storyline. She has clearly kept that at a distance. She's already gone like, hey world, I'm gonna have to be a waitress in order to make money. But other than that, no. Stay at a distance. But then her backstory has to be because she was raped once. And that's... How many male protagonists ever got raped, even in their backstory? It took James Bond, I don't know how many movies. How many are the total movies? Whatever the total of the James Bond movies is. I'm giving the editor stuff to do. It was it was the last James Bond movie where he actually admitted that he'd had sex with a guy, and we can kind of assume that that was a rape situation because of the situation he admitted it in. So, yeah, there's a big difference between how women are portrayed and how men are portrayed. And now the question is, do I mind? Yes, I do mind. Because I would like to have my action heroes be women. Just as often as we have male action heroes. And we can throw in some non-binaries. That'd be great. There are some nowadays. But you'd have to go mostly to television for that, and it's mostly side characters. But at least we got some. But it's rare, and in 1991 and 1990, when this was made, it was almost unheard of. Cagney and Lacey was on television for 6 years, won every award there was. The two leads alternately won the Golden Globe every year. And nobody did it again. And it isn't until the 2020s and the late 2010s that people are going, oh shit, wouldn't it be cool if we had some female protagonists and maybe a female action hero? Ooh.
Xena.
Yes, we had Xena.
And then Buffy.
And that was 1992. Buffy was 1996. So we can say Thelma Louise was before that. Of course, Cagney and Lacey was before that. Cagney and Lacey both had relationships. Lacey was mostly only there to begin with because her household was not bringing in enough money, and she had to become, her career path was becoming a cop. So she did that, but she would have stayed at home if her husband had made enough money to live where they were and take care of the two children. So there's all these things that are going on, and Cagney had to have one boyfriend after another, and then in season 4 or 5, there is actually a rape storyline for Cagney. So women get raped a lot in media. Can we stop that? I think they've stopped it, but I'm not sure. You'd have to do some statistics on it. One of the major impetuses for both these characters is rape. Louise has been raped in the past. It takes her three quarters of the film to admit it, and then even then doesn't want to talk about it, and I cannot blame her. But enough so that now both Thelma and the audience know what happened. But it was really clear enough already, I think, from her saying, we're never going to Texas. We are not going to Texas. So I'm also very confused about Louise's backstory, and Thelma's backstory is a little bit clearer, but maybe if you're American and you're from anywhere close to Arkansas. But for me as a Dutch person, less so. So Thelma got married at 18 to a guy she'd been dating for 4 years. That means that she was dating her final guy at 14. That's not generally how things are done in my area, which is the Amsterdam area. So, I don't know. Even in the 1990s. And then it also is unclear how old is Thelma, because they don't have kids. They make a point of saying that's because the husband didn't want it. But generally people get married at 17, 18 only because they are pregnant, not because why? Why would you do that? And then she immediately becomes a housewife. If she has no kids to take care of, why would you do that? So Darryl shows himself to be an abusive husband. He probably doesn't hit her, but we don't know for sure. Because he's so aggressive in his speech to her and generally to everyone else. They drive this point home when he's got all the FBI in his house and they're all watching television because they're bored waiting for a phone call from the women. And he changes the channel, and they all look at him, and he immediately changes the channel back because they're watching North by Northwest, by the way. They were watching that. You can only hear it, but that's what they were watching. You do not change the channel with North by Northwest, but it shows that his general attitude to all of life was to be an a-hole. And she's put up with that. From the first scene with him, it shows how much of a mouse she is. But if you look at the rest of the movie after she comes out of her mousy shell, she is one hell of a kick-ass person. So that must have been suppressed all that time. And you can do that when you start at 14, marry at 18, and never let her go anywhere. Because that's literally why she went on this trip. Darryl will never let me go anywhere. It's
tiring people.
I think it was a lot more abusive and horrible than the movie likes to show. The movie puts a little bit of a funny slant on it, and abuse is not funny. Sorry, never can be, never will. Even if he doesn't hit her, this was still a type of emotional abuse that went on constantly. And people you can't work with that. This is just, you become like that. You become completely scared and all the other things that I don't know about, because no, I'm not a shrink. And she goes on the trip and she takes the gun. She takes the gun, not knowing why she takes the gun. Darryl has said it's for defense. She doesn't know how to use the gun. Nobody ever taught her how to use the gun. So I have a problem with guns in this film, because I've seen people say if they hadn't had the gun, then the whole problem wouldn't have happened, because then the gun wouldn't have been in Louise's handbag and she wouldn't have pulled it on the guy that was trying to rape Thelma, and she then wouldn't have shot him. Well, if she hadn't had the gun, Thelma would have been raped, and we don't know, Louise might have been at least brutalized by that guy, just physically, and who knows what else. So there was no getting away from this guy. I thought the rape scene was very well filmed, because it is actually watchable. People make these horrible scenes now where it's to the point, well, yes, of course, that's more realistic, but that's unwatchable. So it is probably to show just how horrible it is, which I approve. That is important for a lot of people to see. But if you want women to continue to watch it, and I don't say all women, but people like me, there is a cutoff to how horrible you can make it before I will just literally switch off the television or switch off the film or walk out of the movie. My sister knows that I am definitely willing to walk out of movies.
She walked out of the Napoleon film by the same director, but more recent then.
Yeah, and I didn't quite realize that this was also Ridley Scott. I remember seeing it though. I mean, I saw it in the theaters in 1991 or 2, and it must have been probably 1992, because this film first was shown at the Cannes Film Festival as an add-on, so it wasn't entered into anything. It was like the last day or something like that. So they must have just finished the film, and people were like gobsmacked, and rightly so, because we don't see this. You've got all of the 70s and the 80s full of action films and westerns and road movies, but you never see two women out on the road. Never. So I went into this thinking, oh, okay, it's a road movie. Now, of course, not back then. Back then, I didn't have those categories in my head. That wasn't a thing in my life. But now I'd say, oh, it's a road movie. And I was watching it and going, I don't think it's a road movie. I think it's a western. Because we get JD, played by the delicious Brad Pitt.
Scrumptious.
And he is a robber. And he says he's a robber. He doesn't say, I'm a criminal, or I rob convenience stores. He says, I'm a robber. And he explains how he did it, which the explanation scene where he acts out how he does the simple robberies that he does. You see Thelma just watching it, she's enjoying it, she's giggling, she's having a good time. But the moment that she sees that she needs to get money, she does the thing almost by rote. Almost. That shows us she is intelligent. She's shown us that she was actually mousy and possibly stupid. We don't know, because that's all she's ever shown to people. And now she had to take charge, because that's the moment where Louise breaks down. Louise has kept them going up to that point. The money that she had organized had been robbed by JD. And so Thelma says, pack up stuff, go. Whereas before she had to be the one to be pulled out, let's go, etc. And she was just not with it. And now she knows what to do and she's gonna do it. And she no longer cares. And I think if somebody's been through so much abuse, almost her whole life, because we don't know what her parental situation was. We know nothing about these women. Say she came from an abusive family and then she married with this abusive husband. So why shouldn't she just go and rob everywhere and just go? Just stop caring. And the moment she does that, you can see she's calming down. She no longer has that worried smile on her face, and she stands up straight. She's got agency. It reminded me of Roman Holiday, and I'm sure this is the only review you'll ever see on Thelma Louise that refers to Roman Holiday, because they have 3 days-ish. I didn't quite count the nights, but I think it's about right. In Roman Holiday, Princess Anne had 12 hours to become an adult. And she didn't have an abusive background like that. She didn't have the law on her tail, kinda, because she kind of did have some issues with the law, but mostly because she disappeared on them. And these women have 3 days, especially Thelma has 3 days to become an adult. And she does it in about, I would say, a day and a half. So that's not a lot to give people. I mean, they're not royalty. They're not locked in a gilded cage. But Thelma was locked in a very rough, horrible cage. And I don't know if it would have been better if she had children or when she was going to have children. But at some point she was going to have to ditch that husband. Because from the 2020s viewpoint now, you look at the scene with her and Darryl at the beginning. You go, why the F is she taking all that crap from him? Why? And that's hard to understand if you're not in that situation. So I think now more so. I think in 1991 and 2, when this was in the theaters, because I was saying they went to the Cannes Film Festival and then much later it actually came out in the theaters. So by that time it was about 1992. Certainly by the time it got to Europe. The cops and robbers part does bring it down for me that it is actually a Western. And then you have the guy in the big truck with the tanker on it. They meet him first. He's being rude to them. Very, very rude. Then they meet him again and they call him on his rudeness and they just giggle over that he's so rude. And at the last time they meet him, they actually go for retribution. And that might be a scene to show us how far they've come and how far they are now out of society. But I will give you any male body or non-body action show, especially if you go back to the westerns, but also for like the police actions like the Dirty Harrys and stuff, the amount of people that they blow up in those films, and they never say sorry. They don't worry about the law's gonna get you because you did this. This entire film, yes, Thelma Louise blow up the tanker, but they didn't blow up the guy. They also put the policeman in the back of the car. I think that is actually worse because it's in the desert and it looks now maybe not full summer. It was filmed in full summer, but I don't think it was intended to look to be full summer. But it'd certainly be hot in the car, in that boot of the car.
He'd be dead in hours.
Yeah, that's my problem with it. So they actually make air holes with the gun.
It's
in the
enough.
thing.
Yeah.
No, I think that's problematical. But if we go by Ridley Scott, this was supposed to be a funny movie.
Ha ha!
Ha ha. So you have the Rasta guy comes in and he blows some I hope weed into the into that hole, which I think is just because I'm watching it as a drama. I do not see that this is a comedy in any sort of way. There are some lines that are funny, and my question after having seen Ridley Scott and several other people saying it's so great that it's lighthearted and that there's fun, that's a fun movie. Why is rape fun? Can we just...
If women being abused is fun, apparently.
Yeah, the first scene with Darryl, is that supposed to be funny? Am I supposed to watch that? Haha, look at what? Which part of that is funny? It's not. It's horrible. It's abuse, and it is played out very well, and kudos to the actor who was willing to do it. Because he's an absolute crap bag of a guy. And he continues to be that, and he doesn't pull back from that. The only moment he pulls back from that is when they keep telling him, the police keep telling him, answer the phone just like you would, if your wife would call normally from a holiday and say nice things. And he's like, he's giggling over that because he's like, what? I never say nice things to her. And he didn't. And the moment he does, she literally is like, hangs up the phone going, he knows. The police got to him. I remembered that scene from 30 years ago, is that she hangs up that phone. The moment he says, hi, Thelma, boom. And she's so strong in that scene. I love it. The two women are so strong there. So my question to Louise. Louise, may I ask you a question? Why do you keep phoning back? The reason that they got to them, that the police found them, was because they kept getting the information of where they were. And they did actually pinpoint her phone call. I forget which state we were in at that time. But
not Texas.
Not Texas, and no longer Arkansas. So whatever's in between there, I suppose. I don't know the map. But they should have just hauled ass. They should have not phoned at any time, because there was nothing to salvage there. What we get out of the phone calls is her relationship, Louise's relationship, with the Harvey Keitel character of the detective. Yes, Hal. Because there's a Harlan and there's a Hal in this story, and that just confuses me. So Hal is actually, we start finding out slowly through this movie that he's actually a decent guy. And so she talks with him, so we get the feeling that there's actually connection there. He would have been a good love interest, for instance, for Louise, but that's not going to be in this story. But when Hal got JD, which is the guy played by Brad Pitt, the Brad Pitt character, who had sex with Thelma and robbed them blind. Great sex, but a little bit expensive if it costs you all your money. And then there's that scene where Hal is interrogating JD and starts whacking him over the head with his own Stetson hat or whatever it is. And I love that scene because he says the girls had a chance. Every step that they get further away from this, they no longer have a chance. So he's actually in their corner. And up to the end, he keeps saying to the other guys, if you continue with this, they're gonna die. You've got so many people here, you've got so many armed police officers, that whatever they're gonna do is they're gonna shoot. So they're not gonna survive it. And then they'll come back to the end again. So they're there, Grand Canyon, which is not filmed at the Grand Canyon, which to me, hey, I can't tell the difference. Looks cool to me. And Thelma and Louise say to each other, Thelma says, let's just go. And Louise agrees with it. And they floor it. Thelma is correct. Because There is nothing back there for them. They've got... I was counting police cars, and after about 15 I had to stop counting because I couldn't tell when they were going in and out of frame shot. But there were more than 15 police cars for these two women who have only been at the crime scene for the guy that is dead, the rapist, and they are wanted for some armed robberies.
A tanker that went poof.
I don't know that they knew about that yet. Or the police officer in the back of the car and they stole his gun. But they're sure that they are going to go to jail. And what awaits them in jail? Well, I watched a lot of American television. And jail is not good. Especially for somebody who has been charged with murder. And I don't see how they can even put murder on these women, because clearly it wasn't murder. It would have only been manslaughter, because it's reactive. They don't know any better than it was reactive. But, so they're gonna go, say they would just hold up their hands and say, yes, take us in. And they don't. The police don't. The 20 to 30 to 40 cops don't shoot them. Not a likely story. But if that happened, they reined them in, go to jail, more rape, more abuse, more horribleness. Because going to jail means horribleness, not you are out of society. Going to jail should mean we will remove you from society, and that's what it means. You do not go out in society. Society has no problem, no interaction with you other than possibly phone, post. But it's not. Jail does not mean mandatory abuse, mistreatment, and rape. So they didn't have much to look forward to. So I would say that it is these women against the patriarchy, because the film clearly says there is no space for these women in society. And they only get to that point when they have said enough to all the abuse. What else can you do? Yeah, so they had to go off that cliff. And I don't think it's a funny movie. I think it was beautifully filmed.
To quote me from my other review is that if you have to explain the joke, it's not funny.
Yes. But I will give to you. Who thought this was a funny movie? There's a comedic element in this movie. I think maybe that is a way to market it in 1991 to possibly to the American producers rather than to the American audience, is to say, we're going to have some laughs with women on the road, because maybe otherwise they wouldn't watch it. But I think with Dirty Dancing they left the abortion in. Without the abortion you have no film. It becomes a fluff piece. It's about nothing. And this film, if you don't have the attempt at rape of Thelma, then you don't have a film either. But I think you could have. I think the fact that they go on a run is actually American cinema trying to be a classic Western, as not the lone gunman. Now we have two gunmen. And they go from town to town to town. That's the classic storytelling. There's no clear way that this person makes their money. Usually it's gun for hire or something like that. So that's not a sustainable way to live either. So these women were not doing a sustainable way. But these women actually had to have a storyline about where do we get our money from? How are we going to get from here to Mexico? They literally say, we need gas money. It's not even we need to eat. I suppose they already felt that they could easily probably, grab some food somewhere. But there's not a lot in the areas that they're driving. It's all so barren. They're super far away from society there. And they were going to go to Mexico. I think that would have been... skip all the chase and the criminality and the police. Just let these women go to have a cool road trip to Mexico and start up a new life. Leave the husband behind because he's an abusive, piece of crap.
I think the point of Thelma Louise, the film, is that wherever they go, they're going to attract these kinds of men who will rob them or accost them. And I think the film thinks it's inevitable.
And that tells me it's showing us the patriarchy, because they can't get away from it. It can't... If you're saying that this is going to happen everywhere, because even JD, as lovely as he was, robbed them blind. And then sold them out to the police. So... Yeah, so it's really a buddy movie. With Thelma Louise and Susan Sarandon... Geena Davis, it's just the best ever. They have this beautiful dynamic, and I was talking about what age is Thelma. Well, it's very difficult to judge, but probably can't be much over 25. And then Louise is also is more unknown. I'm thinking maybe 30. But she's sure that it comes across as much older because she has sort of like a motherly way of dealing with Thelma. And at the very end, they're saying how much they like each other. That's one of the things I love about this buddy movie, is that when they're in the car together, they also, sometimes briefly, talk with each other about their feelings. You don't get that with male protagonists. And they just like to talk about the relationship and whether or not they piss each other off or they like each other. They can have fights and then get back together. They are friends for so long, but I think there's an age difference, so I can't see them being friends from school. And there's also the question of when was Louise in Texas. So at first I thought she came from Texas, then moved here. But she says it happened in Texas. Well, she could have been on a trip in Texas. It doesn't have to have been that she lived there. So she just never wants to go back to Texas because that thing happened to her. So that could be.
Bad advertising for Texas, this movie.
It's not the fault of Texas, I don't think. So yeah, I would say an absolute must to watch, no matter your gender. Certainly if you want to see a really beautiful film, because it's so gorgeously filmed. Even the horrible scenes are beautifully filmed. Go watch it, have a good time. Take into account that there's these subjects are realistic. I think it's sad that they're realistic. I also think it's sad that the internet is basically saying nothing much has changed. I hope things are changing. I do have one question before I round this off. Is why did Louise shoot the guy? Because Thelma was out of danger. She'd already pulled Thelma away. They were about to just literally retreat to their car, and the guy started saying really, really horrible things. Yeah. And then she turns around, asks him to say it again. He does, and she shoots him. Whoa.
Retribution.
And she's not sorry. There is no point that they're sorry, because they've already... I think what the film is saying, what the script is saying, and the actresses are playing, but maybe the way it's filmed is not so much, is that they've already gone through so much shit. They are over that, over caring. They cannot care about this. They're just abhorred that it happened, and they have to run. And then they have no time to think about anything. The guns in the story. So it comes from the house, then it goes into Louise's purse. Because Louise is like, why do you have the gun? And Thelma clearly doesn't know how to handle it, so she says, I just put it in my purse. So you have this really good show and tell of, we have a gun, it's going to be used later on. But then it gets used multiple times, and we have another gun from the police officer, so now they're both armed at the end. So they both can shoot at the big trailer tanker and make the tanker blow up. And in the behind the scenes, Susan Sarandon was saying that they handed... No, she didn't quite say they handed her a loaded gun. She just said that she refused to handle a loaded gun next to this actor's face. Or even pointing at an actor. And I was shocked because now we are post this Rust movie problem that happened. And I was already shocked with that there are such a thing as live guns, actually usable guns, because they're only live once you put ammo in it, I think. But that they shouldn't be on any set. So I was Googling it, and there's not much information on whether the gun, they handed her a gun that can shoot. And certainly there shouldn't be any bullets in it. There is shooting of the guns, but most of the time not at people. Is
for dramatic reasons. A couple of times, yes, it does happen.
Only once.
Only once.
Yeah. And I could definitely see not wanting to handle a potential weapon. I was also really surprised when this was much later and isn't about guns, when they said over the radio, and they're doing description of Thelma and Louise, starting with Louise, and they're describing as 5'6", 5'7", and 120 pounds, and I'm like, she what? Because yeah, she's small, and she's certainly thin, but 120 pounds at 5'7", that would be unbelievable. Yeah. And then it's kind of drowned out for Thelma, who is of course taller. Yeah. So there's details like that. The look of the film confused me for the first, let's call it 20 minutes, because of the old-timer car, which is a 1966 car. I thought that we were in the 60s or earlier, and the hair, but the hair was a little bit on the poofy side, which is very mid to late 80s or even early 80s. So I came to the conclusion that because I couldn't find anything on any Google search, that it would have been contemporary, and for me it all looks very old-fashioned, even in 1991. I highly recommend watching this. Definitely put it on your to-watch list if you haven't seen it. Rewatch it if you have seen it. It's just very, very good. And at least it's not a fluff piece.
Or funny.
And it has some liners, but it's certainly not a comedy. Yeah, I love it. Please make more. There's plenty of stuff out there, and we don't all have to pretend we're men. We don't have to do the male storylines with the women. I love it when we do the male storylines with the women, but we can also do female storylines with the women. And it was good that it was written by a woman, because I think without that it wouldn't have worked. And so, yay! Go to make more. And that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.